Hello, everyone. This is Jason Miller, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the introduction because if you don't know who I am, how the hell did you even get here? It just seems unlikely. So this is my new book, Consorting with Spirits. Some of you have read it. Maybe some of you haven't read it and you're just here to ask about spirits anyway, in which case, let's be totally honest. I'm doing this Q&A because I wrote a new book about spirits. So I would be lying if I said if you haven't read it and you came to this Q&A that I wasn't trying to be like, hey, maybe you should buy this book and read it. So that's out there. That said, that's entirely up to you. Maybe you have no interest in that. Maybe you don't ever want to read any of my books. You just came in here to give me a hard time. And that's okay too. Everybody needs a foil every now and then. So, but here we are. So questions about spirits, whether you've read the book, haven't read the book, doesn't really matter all that much. So that's it. Now I'm on speaker view. Does everyone see me as like their main person if you're on speaker view? Because that's how the recording will go. I'm not. I'm seeing somebody else, but like just a blank name, which is weird. So anyway, so I'm glad it's working for everybody else. So I have a bunch of questions collected from Facebook and Instagram and email. But y'all are here, so let's try this. I usually just read questions that people put in chat, but let's try this. Let's go in, and if you can raise your hand, I'll see it. It not physically raise your hand. I mean, use the button that says raise your hand. It's under reactions. So if you do the raise your hand thing, I should be able to see it and then ask you to unmute by name. So let's do that. Now, keep in mind, this is going out on YouTube, as I said. So if your cover will be blown by having your screen name shown, it's that's a real thing. So at any rate, I see a hand. And I'm clicking it, and so I will invite. Is that it? Geo Padma Padamada. Can you unmute? I guess. Is that how it works? I ask you to unmute, and then I have no. This is not working out. This raising hand and unmuting thing is not working out. There's too much going on the screen. So because now I see like Jody's hand is raised on the thing, but it's not showing up amidst the raised hands. Forget the raised hands. Forget it.
Can you can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I'm Jody.
Hey. How are you?
I am well. I am well. May I ask a question?
Go for it.
Okay. I had actually emailed you, but since I'm here, I'll ask in person. I walk by into the Niagara River almost every day, and just being introduced to spirit contact through your book, I'm kind of curious as to how you would approach such a spirit. With, I mean, so a short outline. I mean, do I bring gifts? What gifts would I give to the Niagara River? How long do I stand there? I mean, just a brief outline of what you would tell someone who's going to meet the Niagara River.
Great question. So, I've done my fair share of introducing myself to bodies of water and the spirits in them. And so, I used to live in Philadelphia, and one of the first things I did when I moved there was head down to Penn's Landing, which is a park right on the Delaware, and make an offering. What did I offer? I lit some incense. I brought an incense burner. I sat on the side of the river. I lit some incense, and I rubbed my hands together to get some heat going, right? And I let it all out, and I made this offering to the spirit of the river and the spirits in the river. And then I kind of very silently took a walk around that area. And it was so interesting because I didn't get any kind of like spirits jumping out of the river and being like, yeah, thanks, man. But so this wasn't one of those kinds of experiences, which do happen occasionally. But this was an experience where I then like moving into silent mode, listening mode, which is a thing people sometimes don't do. Sometimes magicians and witches, we're all about doing stuff. We want to do the stuff, right? Like I remember watching somebody conjure a spirit once, and they're like reading the conjuration and more conjuration, and they pause for like 5 seconds. Then are like, nope, hasn't answered yet. Read more conjurations. Like, dude, it's trying to get to you from another dimension. Just give it a second. Like, hold on. Like, let it get a word in edgewise. So I would stop and I would walk along the river, and I was guided at that point to different because it's a city, to different man-made monuments that were sort of interacting with the energy of the river and the flow of the river that way. And then they actually became a part of my regular practice. So, and at that point there was a Nandi bull down there from India, the largest Nandi outside of India. And I remember standing in front of this Nandi bull after making the offering, and I heard kneel, right? I heard like kneel and felt this compulsion to kneel down, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I didn't really know very much about Hinduism at all at that time. So, I'm like, what is the deal with the Nandi bull anyway? What is its relationship to Shiva and so on? So I kneel down and I look up, and the coolest thing happened, because the front of the Nandi bull, when you're kneeling in front of it, the body comes up, and the way that the head comes up, it looks like a big erect penis. And I was in the OTO at the time, so this is all, kind of resonating with me. And so then it became a place of offerings to that kind of mojo. Years and years later, I lived on Lake Lefferts in Matawan, where the shark attacks happened that inspired Jaws. My dining room table was literally like 12 feet away from the lake. And so I went down to the dock at that apartment complex and made offerings. I didn't get the spirit of the lake, but then I did get both spirits of the dead who were lingering at that lake, and some undines, some elemental spirits that I became regularly interacted with, that would show up when there were times of difficulty and danger. But again, if it were me and I was going to Niagara, I would start with simple. Start with incense. You could, if you wanted to, some people would say, you pour libation like alcohol, but I wouldn't do alcohol in the river. I would do tea. Certainly with all the shit that gets dumped in the river that's toxic, you don't want to add anything toxic, but you can certainly, prepare something, pray over it, bring it that, and then now you're stepping out of the sort of general and into the more specific. And then listen, And then if you want to add something more specific, you can let your needs guide you. So if you're going to the river and let's say you want to get rid of something, rivers are exceptional at getting rid of things, because unlike at the ocean, it doesn't flow back. Like the ocean, people throw things in the ocean to get rid of them. And of course, you know, the wave comes out and the wave comes back. So it's not necessarily the most effective way to get rid of things. The river, however, very traditional. Whoosh, it's gone somewhere else. So if you want to go there and get rid of something, either figuratively or physically, think about what it is or what you want the river to bring you, and then make an offering based upon that, right? Like an incense or a tea that's based upon that, something that is absorbed in water that the river can absorb. And then you start from there and you listen. And that's it. Always, you know, start general, start simple, and then listen. It's kind of like how it is with people. Like if you meet somebody for the first time, and let's just say you meet somebody and you want to ask them out, right? And you want to be, you don't want to just be like, well, where do you like to go? You know, you kind of want to do the guy thing, which is like, you know, let me take you here, right? Probably best not to start with some kind of really specialized food that many people don't like. Like, you know, I'm not going to ask somebody out and then like go somewhere that serves durian fruit. Not that I know anywhere in the States that does that, but it smells to the high heavens. So, you know, and then you get to know the person, and then you know what they like and what you like, and then you can be specialized from there. So yeah, that's how I would go about it. All right, so that worked out all right. Let's throw, does anybody have a want to do this hand raised question thing again? We can try it again. If not, you can type them into chat and I'll read them. I don't see any hand raised things, so we'll just let it. Oh, wait, no. All right, this is not working out for me, this whole hand raising shenanigans. I'm actually going through the list. I see no one.
There's questions in the chat though. There
are questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the questions in the chat. All right. Question. This is, I think, from the book. I'm confused about the placing of the triangle in the relation to the circle in the friendly conjuring using the Luciferian method. Is it on the outside of the circle with me inside the circle? Am I overthinking this? So in the book, I stress the importance of being able to conjure spirits with force, like get over here, do what I say, or I'll kick your ass, and through invitation. Hey, here's some offerings. Please come on and let's see if we can create a mutually beneficial situation, or I can ask you some questions. And if you don't show up, then okay, cool, right? Friendly and fierce, both. You really kind of need to have both in your toolbox. So what they're asking about is the triangle. Now, in the friendly conjuration, I follow the lead of Paul Hewson in Mastering Witchcraft, and I place the triangle on the altar in the circle, right? So think of it like this. You are creating a space within the circle for the spirit to inhabit. And it's within your DMZ, it's within your demilitarized zone that you've set up with this circle, right? You've said, okay, everything that happens in this circle, I want to have relative control over. Things are not allowed to just come and go, but I'm inviting you in. But because it's a friendly conjuration and I'm not expecting any kind of fierce battle, you're on the inside of the circle. And the triangle is there not to trap you, but to aid you in manifesting. Triangles do this. They aid in manifestation and can also act as spirit traps. So I place it on the inside. If you were doing a conjuration by force, you could place the triangle on the outside, right? Because now, look, I'm over here in this circle, you're over there in this triangle, and if you break the rules of engagement, then shit's going to get nasty. So we don't want that. But it's an aggressive situation versus a friendly situation. So that's it, really. You're setting up your space in accordance with how you're planning to do the work. People keep coming in the waiting room. I find this waiting room thing kind of annoying about Zoom. It never used to have this. People would just come in. But anyway, so that's really the key, Larry, to it. You're not really overthinking it. You just want to do it in accordance with what mood you want to set, what kind of work you're going to be doing. So it's a good question. Next one is from Andy Lowell. Do you think local spirits are closely tied to the native language of their area, or is there a complete absence of language barrier due to their abstract nature, as there would be with spirits that are higher up on the divine hierarchy? So I don't quite know that I believe in or put much stock in the whole divine hierarchy. I certainly do believe that there are different layers of reality, and that there are spirits that are very vast and there are spirits that are very localized. But the whole divine hierarchy to me is kind of like saying, well, you know, your skin is more important and real and true than your bones, right? Like, that's kind of silly. So that's how I kind of view the whole hierarchy thing. But I get what you're asking. Let's put it this way. The amount of people who contact spirits and have those spirits answer in a language that they don't understand, but that they could then like give to a translator who did understand, has got to be extremely low, like very, very low. I don't think that it works that way, because we're talking about beings that no longer possess, they're not oriented or organized around physical bodies. So while they are impacted by culture, and which is impacted by language, there's not much of a language barrier. The way that spirits speak, even local spirits speak, seems to translate into what we understand. That said, one of the most frustrating things for students of mine in the Hecate course is that there are these like little snippets of Greek that originally were translated for me out of like things that I kind of heard from spirit, and somebody who was, you know, novice at ancient Greek was kind of like, that sounds like this, and I'm like, well, that makes sense in the context, so let's go with that. And then once the Sorcery of Hecate course became very popular and a big thing, then people who really know Greek kind of stepped in, or like, okay, dude, let's clean this up a little bit. And yet I still use kind of the half-assed early stuff that I was using to good effect. So I always say, like, look, linguists, you can geek out as much as you want, but my point is, occasionally spirits will throw you words that you don't understand, and they might be just words of power that you don't, you know, that don't have a translation, barbarous words, you know, but then again, they might, you know. So there you go. Next question is from Anthony. Hey, Jason, how do dreams relate to spirits? This year alone, I've had 2 different dreams that come true the following day after the dream. Also, I've had a few instances of parasomnia. I feel like I might have some kind of affinity for dreams and magic spirits. What would you recommend? Yeah, so cool. So in the book, I talk about different ways that spirits communicate, right? And none of them are particularly better than others. They just each have a different function, a different level of communication. And sometimes you get dreams, especially after the fact. Some spirits prefer to contact you that way. Because your mind is in a very subtle state, and they're maybe using what gets called the twisted language of spirits. This is a term I picked up. It's used, I forget which traditions in South America they refer to the twisted language of spirits. And it always reminds me of Twin Peaks and how the spirits kind of spoke in deep symbolism. But some of the coolest stuff has come from dreams, because, you know, in a dream, it's just you and that spirit. And not only do you have language, but you have the whole reality of the dream to play with. It's magnificent. So what do I recommend you do? The first thing is to get more sleep, get quality sleep, do things that help sleep, and then you can do things that help you train in remembering dreams, which writing down your dreams as soon as you wake up is actually a great tool for helping remember dreams. Some people do like supplements like Huperzine A, or they'll take like melanin, not melanin, that's a skin, melatonin, to, you know, which makes dreams more vivid. But these are things that I would recommend consulting a doctor about before you mess with. But then there's also the idea of lucid dreaming, right? So lucid training in lucid dreaming, or dream yoga, if you want to approach it from a Tibetan angle, is a double-edged sword when it comes to spirit speaking to you in dreams, right? So on one hand, you're getting more aware of your dreams, and you're getting able to interact with spirits in your dreams, because when you become lucid in a dream, you know that you're dreaming. And if you train in lucid dreaming, then you can stay in the dream, because normally what happens is you become lucid in the dream and then you wake up. So you train in lucid dreaming and you become aware that you're in a dream, at which point you can do anything and practice anything and change anything. But even that, it's actually harder than it sounds to like just fly off, or, change the monster that's been chasing you into, like, the hot Hollywood star that you're lusting over. So these kinds of things are not, even though it's all within the mindscape, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to working with spirits, because now your dream is sort of where you're meeting the spirit, right? So if the spirit is like, I'm going to give Anthony a big dream, an important dream, a message that I want him to have. And then Anthony becomes aware, like, I am dreaming, so I'm going to go ahead and practice guitar. Woo! And it's like the spirit is like, whoa, 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 I'm trying to tell you something. And you're like, nope, I'm off. I've taken control of my dream. So you've got the active and passive again, just like I said about the river, like, right? You got to shut up long enough to hear the spirits. A spirit from the lake that I lived at in Mattawan once appeared in a dream. And it's a scary looking spirit. It's like think of a mummy in black and just dripping, right? Like it's dripping all over. It's kind of freaky looking. So, and I've had this vision of the spirit while making offerings at the lakeside. But one night, the spirit appeared in a dream, just like this. And I was like, you're freaking me out, man. I'm going to take control of my dream, because I realized I was dreaming, and I'm going to turn you into, I don't know, it might have been Gillian Anderson or something. The X-Files was still on when this happened. So, you know, I was like, and I won't say what happens next, but, you know, it's my dream. Use your imagination. So all of a sudden, I am jolted awake with this horrid headache. It just feels like somebody punched me in the brain through my eye sockets. And I'm in my room, and then there's the dripping black mummy going like, what was that? Like, why, dude? Why? Like, you know, like that kind of reaction. Like, what are you doing? I'm trying to warn you of something. And sure enough, there was something to be warned of. And so like at that point, it then provided an image that I could then follow up on, which was really important. So yeah, offerings to the water spirit led to the spirit contacting me about danger, and then in a dream, and then me being lucid in the dream kind of like ignored the spirit. So those are the kinds of things you can do to cultivate work in dreams. Just, you know, be aware of the relationship between doing stuff and receiving stuff. Like, don't do so much that you don't receive anything, because that's no good. All right, Johan Anderson asks, I wonder, how do you take a relationship further with trees and elementals? I've recently connected with some trees and some other local spirits, mostly earth and water, so wonder how to make more out of it. Been great at getting rid of stress so far. Well, you know, you go down with some nice wine and say, I'd like to take our relationship further. No, obviously don't do that with trees or rocks, or, I mean, you can, but no, I mean, you do it the same way that you do with people. If you're making connection, then spend more time making that connection, right? If offerings are being accepted, then make more offerings and ask if there's anything else that you think they would like. One of the greatest tricks I've ever learned was, this sounds so stupid, taught to me by a tree, which is to, like, don't tree hug, like grab that tree and then touch another tree in the forest, because these trees and don't exist with the same amount of isolation or lack of, you know, of separation that we do. So it's a network, right? So how do you go further? Well, you insert yourself into the network, and then you can do some, you listen, you meditate, you journey, you make offerings. If you can scry, even you can sit and try to enter the tree in the spirit vision. All of these kinds of things are available. Next question, David asks, what are your thoughts on the necessity of empowerments to use Tibetan Buddhist magic? Apologies if not directly related to the book. It's okay that it's not in the book. It is kind of off topic. But I'll answer the question anyway. In an ideal world, okay, Tibetan Buddhism is designed for you to have the Wang, the Lung, and the Tre for a practice. The Wang is the empowerment. The Lung is the transmission, and the Tre is the explanation. Very, very often, people proceed with 2 of the 3. Sometimes people proceed with only 1 of the 3. They just, they take a Lung and then they start reading the text. They don't really have a clear explanation. Then there are times where people have the Lung or the empowerment. And, to me, I'm old school. There are lamas who give empowerments online now. I'm old school. Like, for me to feel like I have the empowerment, I need to be in the room. It's not to say that it's nothing to not be in the room, but there's a level there that's missing, right? There's an element there, to me, that's missing, and people can argue about that all they want. So yeah, Tibetans don't always have the empowerment. I remember Lobsang Semten once asked me to start coming really early on Sunday mornings to the Tibetan center so that we could do at first Vajrakalaya together, which I did have the empowerment for, and then Guya Samaja, which I didn't have the empowerment for. And I told him I don't have the empowerment, and he's like, "That's okay. I'll teach it to you, and then you'll have the Tre and the transmission, which gives you permission, and then one day you'll get the empowerment. But we can start working right now." And this is the highest yoga tantra. So people have this kind of weird idea of an either or, right? Like, you must have everything perfect, or nothing means anything and I do what I want. And neither one of those are true. And they very often are not how reality is practiced, either in the original culture or out of the original culture. And then there are some spirits where they get prayed to and propitiated all the time without empowerments. There might be empowerments for these spirits, usually lower tantras like Siddhapatra and so on. But people pray to them and make offerings to them and all the time without an empowerment, because they're not necessarily doing a sadhana. This is also true when it comes to voodoo and Santeria and really everything else. These are communal religions. People are in the community and no one polices who they pray to. That doesn't mean that you have instant access to all the secret rituals that the priests know, and some that only they are empowered to do. But, so it's not that training and empowerment and initiation doesn't mean anything, but then the other side of it, where people are just running around and yelling at everyone that such and such is closed and you can't even mention the name of this deity, that's not true either. So I'll leave it at that. Next question. Can you recommend color correspondences for seals of the 4 kings? Are the colors associated with the cardinal archangels, a la the LBRP? Or might be the relationship between, for instance, Michael and the Maimon be more adversarial, so that should be the king color? Should the opposite of the archangels? Any other correspondences or advice? So, first of all, I don't have any recommendations. And but that's not to say that color isn't important or that color couldn't play a role. I think I am traumatized by early Golden Dawn work, where everything was like brightly flashing colors and it's green and red and the rainbow wand, and it's like, orange stars, green clovers, yellow moons. And, you know, I remember in Jersey City, I got to walk into a vault of the Adepti, and I was like, there should be a seizure warning before walking in here. So, you know, the truth is, I don't use a lot of specific colors or color scales or things like that in my work. And even when it comes to things like energy work and elements, I've learned multiple different color schemes for the elements. And so I focus more on their qualities than their colors. And that's just how I roll, unless I'm in a group working with a bunch of other people, in which case then colors can really get everybody on the same page. So it's a case where I don't have any recommendations because it's not a big part of my practice, but that doesn't mean it's wrong or even that I'm not missing out on something. It's just how I am. So there we are. Next question. Is it necessary to have achieved the knowledge and conversation with the agathos daemon before attempting to make contact with lower vibration demons and spirits of any type? If so, is it because it is dangerous or just more difficult? So let me be clear. It is not necessary to have the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, the Agatho Daemon, the Peridros, anything else. Magic existed long before the sacred magic of Abramelin, Brahmalin, and most people don't do magic through that lens. So when people are like, you must have this first, they are really speaking of a very, very specific hang up. Sorry, a tradition that's very, very recent, and well, it is a hang up mostly. So you don't need that. No. If you have that, is that a thing you can do? Yes. Does it help? Yes. Does it have its role? Absolutely. So by all means, it's not something that I don't encourage people to do at certain stages of their life, but it's also not a reason to not do magic. That's, you know, that's not how anything works. This one is, I registered for Black School of St. Cyprian, but you reference a Hecate a lot. Should I also enroll in the Hecate course when it is offered? Even if it overlaps in Black School, is this too much overkill or balancing? So I don't want to talk too much about my courses today. Find everything at strategicsorcery.net. I don't like it when people do free shit and then try to sell shit, so I'm not going to do it. I've been down that road with too many other people. I'll never do it. Whether it's too much or not is only you can know that. So there's a financial commitment, there's a time commitment, and then there's just a bandwidth commitment, because they're very different things. And maybe you're already doing different things that you want to keep up with. Probably are. Everybody is. So some people have done it and they love it. They think that the interplay between the two is great. Some people are like, yeah, it's too much. But the good thing is I let people retake those courses for free, like 2-3 times at least. At the moment, there's no limit, but there probably will be in the future. So if you do fall behind and you're just like way too much, then you can always retake it for free, so you're not locked in. And I'll leave it at that. Next question. When I was a child, I had the same nightmare every night. I wanted them to stop so badly, so every night I would say over and over and again, I'm not going to dream. Eventually I stopped dreaming. Now 40 years later, I only remember very small bits of dream, maybe 3 times a year. So I feel like I blocked my dreams. Can you recommend how I can remember them again? The only thing I can think of is the opposite of what I did as a child, and each night repeat over and over that I'm going to remember my dreams. Do you think this will work? Do you have any other recommendations? So it certainly couldn't hurt. You know, I already gave a couple recommendations about dreams, but you can also, you know, create like a dream lamp. I'm not a big fan of sleeping with open flames, but if you're comfortable, then there are, you know, lamps described in the Greek magical papyri, and you can make one easily enough to a spirit that might help you remember your dreams. Orpheus, you know, Hecate, doesn't have to be one of them described there. And you can get an oil lamp going with different herbs that might help remember your dreams nestled in the oil, or oils, their oils combined. So, you know, like the last time I did one, it had mugwort and star anise and, oh goodness, what was it? Dandelions. Simple, just 3 ingredients in the oil, and then I floated a wick and, you know, put it in a big stone thing because I'm super paranoid of like fire. So yeah, but so there you go. There's a tree asking for more about the network, a question asking more about the network of trees, but I'm going to hold off on that. Just go out, commune with a tree, right? And then just touch another tree and see what happens. Put yourself in that network and listen, feel more than expect like intellectual messages. You know, so open yourself up, feel, connect with the land, etc. I don't get too much into explaining how things are. I'm much more about the truth of meaning and the truth of usefulness, rather than the truth of, well, yes, this is how it is and where it is and how you locate it, and it behaves this way and exactly this way. I tend to think magic and philosophy suck at that kind of thing. And you know, I've told a student before that if Metatron himself came down before me and explained how heaven works on a dry board and left it there for me to see, like, you know, it's like, and here it is, here's the map, I still wouldn't necessarily believe that's how heaven works, because what use is that? Like, how do you test that? I don't know. It's just something some dude told me. The fact that it's some angel that may or may not be Metatron, I don't know. So, you know, usefulness, meaning, love those. Plato, Aristotle, they gave us so much that's of use, so much that's of meaning. And then when they tried to tell us how, like, the science of how the world works, they kind of like held us back for 1,000 years. Next question. In your book, you talk about summoning the Jersey Devil. In your opinion, can anything in the paranormal be summoned and used in a magical way? And do you think everything in the paranormal is spirit-based? Nope. I don't think everything in the paranormal is spirit-based. I don't think everything in the paranormal is real or not real. I don't think that every spirit that is paranormal is necessarily able to be summoned. You know, in the book, I talked about 2 specific spirits to the Pine Barrens, and they both needed to be contacted at very specific places and had a rough time contacting one of them. So it's not, you know, I would be wary of reducing these things. That said, I spend exactly 0 time thinking about or worrying about the paranormal community. I don't watch any kind of ghost hunting shows or anything like that. And whenever like the publicist is like, hey, do this podcast, it's paranormal, I'm always like, maybe let me listen to a couple shows, because I've been burned a few times on those where, you know, you get on and it's like, it's either there's a huge conspiracy that I, as a magician, am in the center of because I must be part of a secret society, or I'm the one who's really the enemy, who's summoning spirits that they then heroically and bravely travel the country cleaning up on TV. So I'm not super into it. It's interesting, and I know people love it, and some folks do both. Lonnie Scott, really into the paranormal, excellent magician, sorcerer, witch, and so he definitely is somebody whose opinion on that I respect. Next question, wondering if you can reprogram a servitor to do stuff beyond the specific purpose for which you originally created it. Usually I acknowledge any active servitors during my daily offerings to spirits. So I'm not going to talk too much about servitors. I do think that servitors are spirits, but that's because I don't think that you create them a spirit at all. I think that magicians create a shell in the astral and perhaps even in the etheric, and then program it on the psychonoetic or the mental level, and then formless consciousness inhabits it at the moment of animation, and that essentially it then becomes a spirit. Now, if all the other rules apply, the spirit has taken up this mantle, and if it's a well-named servitor, it will behave that way and only that way. Sometimes spirit servitors, if they're left out in the wild, will evolve and change and do different things, whether you want them to or not. And then sometimes, yes, you can bring them in and change them if it's a way that's in accordance with how it's originally constructed, right? Like, are we talking a slight change, or are you taking like some servitor that you designed to take vengeance upon someone and now you want it to do love magic? Like, that would not be a very good use of time. So that's that. We've got no more questions in chat at the moment. You guys can fill those in, but I'm going to answer a few that came in through Facebook, Instagram, and email. So Ian Corrigan started us off with a great one. If you don't know Ian's work, Magnificent Druid. Have you prospected for spirits starting from near zero on a piece of land or a circumstance, and what was the result? And so, yeah, I have. I've gone to a place and just sort of reached out to find out what spirits were there. And the result is usually I make contact with spirits of the landscape first. They seem to answer first. Spirits of nature and so on seem to answer first, unless there's some overwhelming presence there. But in general, I usually do this through making general offerings, and so local spirits of the earth, land underneath where I am tend to answer first. So that's that's what I get, and it's how you roll. Melissa Gelfman asks, I would ask you if you truly believe in the authenticity of spirits, if you think there are legitimate beings on another plane, or how you feel about people who channel spirits. So yeah, I believe spirits are real as you and I are, which recently I pointed out in an ultimate sense may not be all that real at all, but at least as real as you or I are. And That said, they are more subtle. So the ability, our interactions with them, what we project onto that and our ability to perceive them plays a much heavier role than it does when we're interacting with spirits that are organized around a body, AKA me and you. How do I feel about people who channel spirits? Depends on the channeler, I guess. I mean, you've got a gambit here, a spectrum. There are people out there who sometimes get amazing things. I don't know any that describe themselves as channelers, which I don't know. To me, I just associate as like a very early 80s, 70s kind of thing. Seth Speaks and all that. But there's some good information that comes out of these things. And then there's bad information that can come out of these things. Does that mean that the good information is from real spirits and the bad information is from crap the channeler made up? Not necessarily, because spirits don't necessarily tell the truth. And if they are telling the truth, they're not necessarily wise. Just like with people, right? So I don't have any opinion. You're going to find that I have no overarching opinion on anything where it's like, well, how about this wide swath of humanity? And it's always the details, right? The internet is making us go to extremes. And I desperately want to change how people think and talk about magic, because the ways that it gets discussed are increasingly just not great. Isabel Peralta asks, have you worked with spirits from the Lovecraft mythos? If so, what has been your experience with them? So, yeah, I actually at one, I suppose I still am a member, but I joined the Esoteric Order of Dagon back when it was a thing. Have my membership and everything, and yeah, I've played in those pools. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes, though, one gets the impression that Lovecraft was tapped into something and then took that something and then made stories out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that the details of his stories are useful. And sometimes you definitely don't want to even use those names because he was so racist. I mean, like, not just in that, oh, well, he was a man of his time. No, he was, racist for his time. So no one should be running around the woods yelling about Shub Niggurath, the black goat with 1,000 young, without realizing that, there's probably some racist crap going on there. But that doesn't mean that the idea of spirits and gods that are so cosmic, so vast, that they're not human-centric. They're not focused on us. They're not linked to any one human culture because they're not linked to human awareness really at all. They are by nature alien, isn't something that's worth exploring, and isn't something that you couldn't use those stories as a launching point for. So I think using that as a launching point to do an investigation is helpful. I think trying to recreate cool stuff that's in your favorite books is largely not helpful. I'm going to get back to the questions here in a minute, but I'll do a couple more Facebook questions. How do we draw the line between what is a land spirit or deity or a demon? How the nature of the being would influence the approach taken for contact? So I don't know how useful it is to draw the line, to be honest. The line implies something that's really, really firm. But it's also not useful to just say, oh, well, they're all just spirits, they're all the same, because that's not true either. It's a spectrum. If you've ever traveled from one country to another, maybe you've traveled through a good number of countries, right? Is there, like, at the border, like, everyone on this side is like fully this, like, you know, Austrian, and everyone on the other side is fully Hungarian? No, they're like, that's not how it works. But yet there are different rules and protocols that might be applied based upon where you are, and the qualities and how they inform each other will differ from the borders into the center of the country or in the cities. And so it's a lot like that with angels and demons and land spirits and things. So, you know, angels and demons, I tend to think that they're both very big, very vast spirits. So they're not highly localized. The biggest difference that I've found, if we're to generalize, is that demons are highly individualistic and angels are collectivist in their thinking. So, you know, good and evil, no, not really, but sometimes. Hot and cold, no, not really, but sometimes. Like, maybe it's not a bad rule of thumb. Wrathful versus peaceful, no, maybe it's a good rule of thumb. And even collectivist versus individualistic, it's a good rule of thumb, I found. But it's not to say that there won't be individualistic angels or collectivist demons. Land spirits, that's a difference of orientation, right? So in the book, I describe how there are spirits that can be organized around principles and elevated by cultures and worship and so on and so forth, and they become very vast. You can pray to St. Michael where you are, and I can pray to St. Michael where I am, and we're both going to get a good result, right? St. Michael is going to respond to the degree that we're able to get a response. The spirit of the stream, or in the stream that runs through my property here, you can try to invoke it in Cleveland, but you're not going to get it, because when it's there, like, I can point to where in the woods it is. Ghosts tend to be oriented like this. So, like, where is it? A good part of evocation, like of the trials of evocation, when you know, these evokers, you know, when we're reading things to get the spirit to appear in the crystal or in the triangle and appear in a way that is comely and that I can understand you and all this kind of stuff. That's taking something that's oriented really vast, like, wow, world over, and kind of saying, nope, get down here, nope, here, down here, right here, and only here, in a way that feels like that river spirit feels. So I can have a conversation with you rather than like wonky dreams or images. And then sometimes those spirits end up getting represented by local representatives that I tend to call mall Santas, right? So the mall Santa is, well, you know, by the time kids are like 4 or 5, they realize that the guy at the mall is not, in fact, Santa Claus. So therefore, the real Santa works in the North Pole, and these guys must just be pretending to be Santa, and they'll tell Santa what I want. And then, you know, maybe they do it, maybe Santa gets them on it or something. And so local spirits that fill the roles of deities or larger spirits, I tend to call them mall Santas. So a few more of your questions have come in. So let's go ahead and say, how do, so Quirin asks, how do spirits perceive us on the physical plane? Depends on the spirit and some are aware, some are not aware until we reach out. It's like that. Somebody in a class once said, because they were having trouble seeing spirits, and they said, well, I'm just assuming that if a spirit wants me to see it, then I would see it. And well, no, not at all. The spirit may not even be aware that you want to see it. You kind of have to reach out, and then maybe it's trying to get you to see it and you can't see it, right? So it's like that. Like, how do they see us? I don't know. It's kind of like, what is the angel's true name? Like, do you have 12 vocal cords? Because if not, maybe you can't say its true name. So there you go. Next question is from Harry. Not sure if it's mentioned in the book. Is there insight on animal communication, both with our pets and pets that are no longer with us? I don't cover it in the book, and I don't do much of it at all. So it's just never been a particular interest of mine, and so therefore I don't have much to say about it. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just not my thing. So I leave it to those whose thing it is. Amy asks, are there any resources you can recommend for learning more about classes and spirits? Oh, come on, Amy, you're basically like begging me to plug my own crap here now. So obviously I have a lot of courses, and there are, I wrote a book about spirits, and rather than try to rack my brain for like this book and that book, because afterwards I'll be thinking of like, oh my God, but this book is better, and why didn't I think of it? Let me just say that your task at the moment is separating signal from noise. When I was young, it was about finding anything at all, any information at all, whether it was true or not, would have to be usable, because that's all there was. Especially before I moved to a city, like it just wasn't like a big deal. Like, before I could drive, I had to go to Walden Books at the mall with mom and dad and make do with whatever they had. So, and we liked it that way. We didn't like it that way, actually. We really wish there was more stuff and better stuff. Well, now there's more stuff and better stuff. It is like somebody took the Library of Alexandria and redid it. But here's your problem. They took the Library of Alexandria and they chopped up all the books and they hid them within other crappy things. So for every good bit of information out there, you have to weed through hundreds of bits of bullshit. So that's unfortunately your problem. And it's everywhere. So you're going to have to wade through bullshit to get to the good bits, and you're going to have to use you're going to have to tune people out. There is so much bad information out there, and people are using the internet to overcomplicate their lives. Like, your teacher says, do this, right? And then you're like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Cool. And then people will then get online, and then they'll be like, oh, well, this person's teacher told them to do something else, and that something else is more complicated, right? And then so here's an example. I remember I was telling somebody, like, go to the cemetery, leave an offering for the graveyard dirt, a dime, 3 pennies, some whiskey, and thank the spirit. Maybe do a reading to see if the spirit is amenable to working before you do it. Left it at that, right? Because I knew that that's what that person would do. Like they would do that. That is within their capabilities of doing it. And then they went online. And then they found somebody who was like, well, my teacher told me that I have to first go to the oldest grave and then propitiate that. And then another person said, well, no, I heard that you first have to smoke yourself an incense and so that the dead don't get you. And then another person said, well, I heard that it can only be done on these dates and that you should never go on these dates. And so then they came back to me and I'm like, so did you get your graveyard dirt? And they're like, well, no, because I haven't had time to smoke myself and make an offering. And I haven't had time on a Saturday at exactly 3 p.m. and all these other things. And I'm like, why are you doing all this? And we're like, well, other teachers say to do these things. And so I'm doing them all. And that's how you wind up doing nothing. So by all means, read what's out there, take courses, take classes, run it through a bullshit detector. And, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And don't think that what other people are doing is perfect just because they're doing it. Next question from Annabelle. I hope I got that right. What is your way to identify spirit name or intentions? Also, my favorite chapter in your book is when you talk about familiars. In my country, familiars are closely related to the spirits of your ancestors. Do you have a particular formula or spell? So, all right. So how do I identify a spirit name? I will ask it its name if I don't know the name ahead of time. Sometimes I will know the name. If I don't know the name, I will ask it its name. If I don't hear anything or put anything together or give hints of a name, then perhaps I will attempt to divine a name through some other method, although I almost never do. I will hear something usually, or maybe an inspiring thought comes over the mind. And then I say, can I call you this? Is this adequate? And the spirit will then either give a yes or a no. And maybe this has to be confirmed with a divination method, or maybe you can hear this and sense this on your own. So it's a back and forth, like, give me the name. Okay, did I hear this right? Is this the name? No? Okay, let me go back and try again. Or maybe it's not the name, but yeah, I'll go by it, right? Like, how many people have to suffer through, like, just people massacring their names if they're not from wherever they live, right? Or they have an unusual name. And then finally they're like, good enough. Like, you're mispronouncing it, but let's just move on. Or sometimes, you'll travel and somebody will want to get, I remember I lived in Parping for a while and they found Jason a little hard to say. So, they started calling me Paljor because that was one of my first refuge names. So, and then, can we call you Paljor? Sure. I'll accept that. And so then it works that way. How do we identify a spirit's intentions? Honestly, the same way you identify a person's intentions, through experience, through working with them, knowing them, trial and error. That's the best way. There are oodles of traditional methods of divining the spirit's intentions and whether it's lying and things like this. And I don't use any of them, because I don't ever want to be in the position of thinking that a spirit can't lie or definitely has good intentions when in fact it doesn't. That's the most dangerous position to be in. Whereas I can regularly rely on somebody to act the way that they're acting unless they're being deliberately misrepresented. And since I don't live in a horror movie, I don't assume that spirits are deliberately misrepresenting themselves in order to trap my soul. So I go by, how do I do this with people, and move on from there. Does this mean I occasionally meet spirits that I don't like and that don't like me, or that it doesn't work out? Yep, that's part of life. As for familiars, I'm super happy that you loved the chapter, but So, because it's something that not a ton of people have commented on. I don't even know if they, sometimes I wonder if people like jump right to the conjuring portion or they just read the beginning. But I give this seal for contacting familiar spirits using Hecate and asking Hecate to, and there's invocations in the books to Hecate, drawing that on the ground and asking her to put you into contact with familiar spirits. So that would be a particular spell or ritual. There are countless others. Next question from Eranos. I live in a forest in northern Wisconsin, and there are 2 Native American reservations in my county. I can feel there are a lot of spirits in the forest, and I'm wondering if you have any recommendations about connecting with these spirits. I would also love to conjure Astarte. Do you have any recommendations that are not in the book to connect with her? So, the first part is you're looking specifically to contact spirits of the land related to Native American practice. So my first question is, are you Native American? And it's not a matter of, well, it's a closed practice, so don't do it. But it's a matter of seek out the people that are and talk with them, right? Like seek out the living representatives of a tradition and see what they have to say. Not just one, but a few, because something else that's lost in current conversations is that, entire cultures do not speak with one voice. So when you may find that someone says, no, you shouldn't do this, and another person says, yes, I invite you to do this in a respectful way. And then you have to choose who you listen to, right? You listen to both of them, but you have to choose who you heed. So that would be the next thing. And then if you didn't get anywhere that way, I would not approach it through the Native American angle. I would just seek to approach the spirits of the land as simply as the spirits of the land that you live on, and not try to emulate what the people of this living tradition are currently doing. So the next part of this question is about Astarte, who I talk about in the book as Astaroth, who is of course rooted in Astarte. But since you're talking specifically about Astarte, maybe you're referencing the goddess Astarte, in which case I don't really have any specific recommendations. And the recommendations for Astaroth are get conjuring. There's more than enough in the book and more than enough out there in the Twilight Grotto and so on, where there's free versions of all the grimoires to get working. My first successful conjuration of Astaroth was done using like the complete book of magic and witchcraft, which is this sort of craptastic book from the 70s that tells you can fascinate women by giving them cheese. So it's, it had little bits and pieces from the Grimoire Verum, and I put something together and it worked. Because what is communication with this? It's getting something's attention, making it know that you want their intention, and trying to bridge the communication gap. That's it. I'm going to stop admitting people in. There people just keep popping up for the admission thing. So if you leave at this point, I'm not readmitting more people. I'm going to ignore that from now. Next question. Do you think it is unadvisable to rely on one main deity to do all sorts of magic because they may be too busy? Would it be best to ask them to point us in the direction of their local rep? Nope. Deities are not too busy. They don't sit at desks with piles of paperwork. They're not singular beings experiencing space and time in the way that we do. They are more subtle beings. So you don't have to do that. If you want to be put in contact with local rep, then by all means, but you may already have been without even knowing it. Next question is from Karen. I once and only once had a vivid experience with some kind of spirit. It was the middle of the night. I wasn't seeking out a connection, so I got a little freaked out and chased it off, kind of as a knee-jerk reaction. I haven't had a vivid experience since. Everything is so subtle. I question if I am receiving any contact at all. How do I dial it back up again? So, you know, that time you had the experience that freaked you out, was it in response to a ritual you did? If so, was it a ritual that was aiming to contact spirits, right? So if it was, and it sometimes is, then you did what my friend Sarah Mastros, author of the Big Book of Incense, or Big Book of Magical Incense, calls playing ding dong ditch with the spirits, right? Like when you ring somebody's doorbell and then run away and giggle, like, spirit, are you there? And the spirit shows up and you're like, ah, go away. So, you know, it happened once and it's fine. So maybe not, you don't have to dial up that spirit again. But the ways that you contact spirits, that you open up to spirits, time is the biggest factor. Time, spending time, silent time, idle time, meditation time. Then there are some tips and tricks. Like in the book, I talk about a trick where you see whatever's in front of you as if it was on a screen, basically making the three-dimensional view in front of you a two-dimensional view. You pretend basically you're staring at a giant 4K TV screen and that there's something behind it. And what this does is it's just a mental trick. It gets your brain to collapse the 3 dimensions that it perceives things in into 2 dimensions, which then leaves a vacancy to be filled by the spirit you are calling to, right? So then you reach out, what is behind this screen? And so that's a little trick. So there are all kinds of little tricks. But honestly, spending time, not just during the period when you're have called a spirit, but every day, getting used to periods of time where you're just sitting. And then other periods of time where you're sitting and meditating. These are very different things. They look the same from the outside, but in one of them, you're focusing your mind on the breath, on a mantra, on a point in space. And if a spirit shows up, you just say, nope, I'm I'm training my mind, right? Any distraction that comes up, you ignore it and you train your mind. This is really useful for spirits because it gets you to know the fabric of your own mind. And very often spirits speak to us through the mind. Idle time, however, where you just sit and you relax and you let the mind do what it does. Well, now you're engaging openness. Now you're engaging in imagination. Now you're engaging in making connections. And, you know, as society became more and more technological with more and more distractions, we've started to lose this. And then in 2007, we basically took the last little bit of like boredom time, of idle time we had, and we just drove a stake through its heart with an iPhone. And our brains have never really been the same since. So you have to recapture a little bit of that. But the other thing I'm going to point out, though, is that sometimes people get really, really down about not having these wild conversations with spirits. And I just want to say that if you are one of those people, there is every chance in the world that you can have a few meaningful and fairly deep messages from spirits come through. And then other messages you might have to rely on divination or things like that, or just, you know, going on your best guess. But then those people that are like, yeah, I went to the open circle, I closed my eyes, and instantly I was transported to a realm of fairies, and then I ran away with Queen Mob, and she put a crown on my head and, you know, told me all these things. They're not who you want to emulate either, because, and I'm one of those people, but that's not what you want, because those people also have work to do. And that is discernment. That is realizing that most of what they're getting is their own mental projection upon whatever small spiritual spark they've actually encountered. And so you've got to learn to fix this ratio, this perception projection ratio, and be really discerning about what you get, rather than just worrying about getting anything. I mean, I get the hunger for, like, I want to see something, but I'm always like, listen, you know, I'd rather be a person whose magic, like the things that I want to do with magic, get done, and I'm able to improve my life, and I'm able to get make changes in my life because of the work that I'm doing, and I've become happier, wiser, and able to find more meaning. And when I want stuff to happen, it happens. I'd rather be that kind of witch than I read this book on Hecate, and now Hecate has come down and told me that I need to go and teach and be, you know, but Hecate isn't like what she's like in the books. She's actually Kali, and, you know, like these wild tangents of gobbledygook that don't lead to anything. So yeah. And the last bit is engage the imagination when it's happening, and engage discernment after it's happening. Sometimes people who aren't used to seeing spirits, like, they'll sit down and they'll look at the crystal or the scrying mirror, or they'll close their eyes and they'll get a glimmer of something. Like, they'll get that first little notion of spirit. And then they'll be like, is it really the spirit? Maybe it's not. I better check. Like, okay, I'm still here, I'm still me. And what are they doing? They're kind of pushing that spirit away, right? So just engage it. Don't censor yourself while it's happening. Analyze it after the fact. So there you go. David asks, can any noob do the conjuration of Astaroth in the book? Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, you want to have some magic under your belt. You want to be able to protect yourself if something goes wrong. So, but that's really, you know, that's it. Yeah, no, you don't need any kind of degree in magic to do it. Somebody, GSB XXX. Okay. Frater Miller, the querent, seeks suggestions, advice, recommendations to improve intelligence. So I'm not a frater, and study harder, and you know, like, sure. I mean, you can absolutely summon spirits that teach rhetoric and increase intelligence, and ask them to aid you. But in general, spells, spirits, any kind of magic that is meant to change a quality in yourself, it works best as a seal upon work that you've done, or as a catalyst for work that you are doing. like if I'm like, okay, well, I want to become more intelligent, so I'm going to enroll in school, or I'm going to pursue this series of study, and now I'm going to summon a spirit to help me understand, adapt, get the right knowledge, sift through the signal to noise, all that stuff. The spirit can help you with. If, however, you're like, well, I want to become smart, I'm going to summon a spirit and tell it to make me smart. Is that what the books suggest might happen? Yes. Is that what happens in reality to people? No. And I know this because the people that insist it must happen because the book says it must happen are not, in fact, the people I would consider very smart. So next up, Quirin, would you have a recommendation for specifically contacting the spirit of a city to use him as an intermediary for other spirits living in the city? Yeah, go to important places of that, of that city and try to reach out. Is there one spirit of a whole city? If you're a Christian, then perhaps there's an angel of the city. Maybe just throw the name L on the end of the city and take a stab at it, or ask an archangel to hook you up, or a saint or an intermediary spirit to connect you with the spirit of a particular city. But also, do a good bit of working the land. One of the beautiful things about living in Philadelphia were all the spirits that were unique to the city, and traveling to New Orleans and living in Kathmandu, the same. So yeah. Renee asks, I've tried many times to conjure a spirit, and I got a face in the mirror nearly each time, moving faces, even an angel playing a flute, but never any further. I cannot reach a communication, whether in my mind or in any audio sense. Is there any way to train, have a communication to get information from a spirit? Yeah, so the first thing to do is, if you've got a face, and especially if you've got an image like that, do you then ask a question, right? Like, are you then, okay, I need an answer to such and such question. Will you give me the answer to this question that I have? And if not, then, try that. And if so, then sit and listen and look. Does the face change? Is it trying to communicate something? If not, then sit longer. And if that doesn't work, then afterwards you can try to get it to speak to you through a divinatory method. Use a pendulum, perhaps. Or ask it to provide a dream or an omen afterwards. So these are all methods that can be done. I'm going to flip now over to Instagram questions. So Witch of Southern Light asks, what are your thoughts on archetypal spirits versus specific named spirits or deities? For example, spirits of place, spirits of inspiration, egregores, etc., versus Hecate, Diana, and so on. What are my thoughts? My thoughts are very similar to my thoughts with people. There are famous people that everybody knows the names of. There are locally famous people or notable people in your community that everyone in your community knows the names of, but that I don't know the name of because I'm not in your community. And then there are just ordinary people that are, run of the mill and not very famous at all. So they're each valuable for different reasons, right? Working with local spirits that aren't well known, well, that's a very localized presence who's not busy, right? like deities aren't busy, but sometimes very localized spirits might be, you know, tied up with one thing or another, because they're a lot more like we are. They're in a place, like you can point to them in a room. So getting some of those on your side is great for local things. It's like getting to know the local barista who serves coffee. If you want a great coffee, you might be better off, you know, being friendly with the local barista and leaving a good tip than you are getting Jeff Bezos's, he doesn't own Starbucks, the guy who owns Starbucks, his phone number, right? Like that's not really going to help you at your local Starbucks unless you want to scare the living crap out of everybody that they better do what you want or you'll let the CEO know. That's the difference. That, like, really, that's the difference. It's just like it is with people. There are different orientations that spirits can be, can exist at, and that makes them useful for different things. Inner Peace 82 wants to know, how do we know we are working with deities and not trickster spirits? So it's, how do you know you're working with the person that you think you're working with and not some trickster person, right? Like, why would we think we are working with a trickster person, right? Like that would be number one. Like, what reason do we have to think there would be some trickster spirit pretending to be this deity? That's number one. Like, is the deity, somebody recently actually said they went about and they started making offerings, like they did my spirit feast from the book, and then all the local spirits were like, give us massive quantities of meat or we will kill you. and you know, other spirits were like, and I want this and I want that, give it to me now or we will destroy you, we will wreck your life. And of course the advice there is, yeah, you tell those spirits that you never want to talk to them again. You basically give them the old get the fuck out, and if they don't get the fuck out, then you constrain them and banish them and make them leave. And the next time you do a spirit feast at your house, you have, you know, you contact the guardians first, who are actually, you make offerings to the guardians first, but you make offerings to the deities and the guardians to say, and any local spirits who want to cause me harm, I don't want to hear from them until the last part of the ritual, in which case it's not even that you want to hear from them, you're giving them an offering to leave you alone. And if they don't leave you alone, well, that's on them, but you're not opening up communication with them. So, you know, how do you know? People are obsessed with how they know if it's a spirit, if it's the spirit that I tried to contact, or is it another spirit? But we're not like this with people. We assume people are who they say they are, and then they are who they are in the room. That's a saying I got from Mad Men. If you've never seen Mad Men, I'm about to give a spoiler. Mad Men spoiler. Don Draper, the main character played by John Hamm, is not actually Don Draper. Don Draper was his commanding officer in Korea who died, and Dick, whatever his name was, had kind of a crappy life that he didn't want to go back to, so he took Don Draper's identity, and then he became this world-class ad man. And he gets found out, and the guy finds out, goes to his boss and says, this isn't Don Draper. And the boss says, who cares? He is who, you know, he is who he is in the room. And I assure you that the Don Draper that can make ads is right there. So, you know, if you're contacting a spirit that is behaving well, providing wisdom, providing actionable intelligence, that is giving, you know, that is fulfilling pacts with deeds, that's how you know the spirit, right? If you then find out the spirit that you've been relying upon, that's been providing meaning and usefulness for years isn't really the spirit you thought it was, well, maybe the spirit you thought it was is actually a horrible jackass, you know? So think more in those terms than, you know, how do we know? How do we know? Because you never know. You never really know with people. Your spouse might have been in witness protection, and I think you know if it's your spouse, but they are who they are. They are who they present themselves to be, and it's the same thing with spirits. Anna Lee Holm asks, is it possible to communicate with spirits even if you don't have a clue who they are? Is there a communal way to approach the spirits in a peaceful way, and how? Yes, you approach spirits that you don't know who they are in the same way that you approach people if you don't know who they are. So what is, you know, you perceived a spirit, or maybe you just want to get to know a spirit of a place or a thing. You reach out and say, hi, you know, I'm reaching out to the spirit of X. I would like to introduce myself and make an offering. And if that doesn't get you anywhere, then maybe you call upon the power of deities that you have a relationship and work with. And maybe even a chain of deities like God and angels, or Hecate and Lampads. And you build this connection to the local spirit with the authority that and that comes from that deity. But if you do a lot of spiritual work, then, and you make offerings on the regular, spirits will be happy to know you, because you're just a dazzling person to the spirits who is, you know, a good person to know. So why wouldn't they want to get to know you? Dinner Time 484 asks, what are your views and feelings about spirit work with children in the house? My kids are age 7 and very sensitive. You know, just be neat about it. You don't have to banish the living crap out of everything, but certainly I wouldn't be like, okay, I'm gonna do this massive curse and invite all of these bloodthirsty wrathful and angry spirits into my home when I have kids living there. I would find somewhere else to do that. Or if I did do that, then I would make sure to really banish and cleanse afterwards so that there's no trace. If you do that kind of thing all the time, then it's gonna affect, your home. Otherwise, the spirits that I deal with the most reflect my nature. And it's who I would, so I'm happy to have them around and impacting. So that's my advice. There's a couple more questions in there, and we're going to go for just like another 10 minutes or so. I think 2 hours is a good run. I'm sorry about questions I didn't get to. So I'll breeze through a few. This one is a good one from A Wolfdom. A-Y Wolfdom. Cool. I don't know if it's wolfdom like the domain of rune of wolves, or if you're like a wolf like dominant. But either way, cool. In most mythologies, there is usually an ongoing conflict between various beings. Do you think these conflicts are real or often designed for story? I don't really make determinations on whether they were real historical events or not. I just don't care. They are very rarely invented whole cloth without any input from the spirit whatsoever. So for instance, when I was writing Advanced Planetary Magic, I was really getting stuck on the invocation of the sun through Venus, I think it was. So this was an invocation of solar power done at the hour of the sun, but on the day of Venus, so that solar power filtered through a Venusian patterning or ambiance, if you will. And I was having this difficulty. I could not think of lines. Nothing was going wrong, but I was feeling this spiritual resistance. And then as I sat down and kind of thought about it and investigated, it's because I was focusing on Aphrodite and Helios as the names. And Aphrodite and Helios have a rather big conflict and don't like each other very much. So, you know, I took that mythological conflict and said, okay, well, I've got to find a different way to skin this cat. And I approached that invocation from a different angle. So yeah, these things, does that mean that it's a real event that happened at some point? No. But things need not have happened in order to be true. I encourage everyone involved in magic to look for these things where we're like trying to nail down the truth of fact and shift to truth of meaning and truth of use, because these unverifiable proclamations of fact don't really help anyone, and they're not really all that useful for magic. I'll answer, only a couple more questions came in. Do you think we will make advances in the future with new technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality to better communicate with spirits? I do not. I do not. If anything, I think that they will further disable us from communicating with spirits. And I guess my worry is that someone will write a chat bot for Hecate, and then people will get on, and you know, maybe the AI will be loaded to look like, you know, to feel what what that person or what those people thought the mythological Hecate is like, and then the AI will take it over from there. I guess if I was more like, if I thought that all of this was great, maybe it's yet another avenue for the spirits to speak through. So maybe Hecate decides to use that as an avenue for contacting people. But I don't hold high hopes. I tend to think that most technological advances in the last 15 years have been pretty awful. And so, you know, just to break it down really easy, humans have a capacity to adapt to change, right? And our capacity increases over time. So it goes up like this. But technology builds upon more technology, right? Like if you take two pieces of rice, if you take a piece of rice in one chess square and another piece of, in the next chess square, you put two pieces of rice, and the next piece of square, you put 4 pieces of rice, and then 8, and so on and so forth. By the end of the 64th square, you've got something like, you know, quintillion bits of rice, because that's the way exponential change works. So whereas human adaptability to change is going like this, technological change is now hitting the second part of that chessboard, exponentially changing faster. We don't really have any control over it anymore. AI is now speaking to AI in languages that we don't really even understand. Some of the people that do understand it best are very, very young and have no accumulated wisdom. So they have the intelligence that comes from hours and hours, but not the wisdom that comes from years and years. And I just think it's a big disaster. And as for contacting spirits, it's all detrimental, because the real contacting of spirits, the real seeing into the astral, into the etheric, having a mystical experience involves the ability to shut the fuck up for a little while and quiet the mind and surrender the mind to the experience. And VR and AR are not helping with that at all. At all. They're going, let's put it this way, the distance that you feel from, that you might feel from the spirit world right now, like this is a place that I don't immediately, I'm not oriented to very well. And that's a condition of being human. You're a spirit organized in a physical body. So you can't, if you think that you are just constantly oriented to the spirit world, then, you've got some problems. But some of us can orient ourselves to the spirit worlds or layers of things easier than others, but none of us are naturally oriented there. We're about to experience a case where people are not oriented to the physical world in a helpful way. So the distance that you're feeling from the spirit world, from the divine world, people are already feeling that distance from the physical world. And laying augmented reality on top of it and then giving VR to escape from it is just going to exacerbate that. And everything that has come from like the extremism and the division, it's all gasoline on a fire. So that's how I feel about it. I'm not keen on this at all. And I'm not a Luddite either. I'm not old fashioned. I don't particularly think the past is where we should be looking. So like if you found me and I happen to be in like a traditionalist group, I'll be the one saying like, look, you got to think past these traditions a little bit. No one, like we don't practice medicine because, well, this is the way it was done in the 1600s, and we don't do anything that way other than magic. So, when I'm in rooms with this, like the past is better people, I'm always like the futurist. And when I'm in futurist rooms, I'm always the like, oh God, this is bad. It's happening. We need to understand it, but it's bad. I don't see any more questions here. So I'm going to go I got a few in from email, and I value email more than anything else. So, because I am old, but question number 1, I've experienced spirits or land beings since I was a child. I've always encountered angels twice, but I've been practicing Vajrayana Buddhism for 14 years. I have a wonderful Lama, numerous empowerments, do a sadhana to a Dakini every day. I don't miss, and yet I've never encountered the Dakini in a noticeable way. I trust that they are there, but I haven't seen it or felt it. Do you have any thoughts on this? Are Tibetan Buddhas harder to contact? They are not harder to contact, but they are not localized beings, nor are they spirits that you conjure in the sense that you might conjure an angel, nor are they even deities that are supposed to give visions in the sense of like a beatific vision from God. So what you're looking for is the wrong thing. If you have a vision of a Dakini, that's great. That's awesome. But, and it can be a seal upon practice. It can be something like that happening can be a sign that like, okay, now I'm ready to move to completion stage practices. But it is not by itself a mark of attainment. Trust me, there are people who sit down and do these sadhanas and they're immediately like, and then I saw Vajrayogini and she came down and sat on my lap and we had sex, and then she's got my child, and that, like all the kinds of like wild vision stuff. It's not what the practice is for. What is the Vajrayana practice for? It is to become enlightened. In Vajrayana, there's a Dakini or a Yidam that is enlightened, and you are dissolving your sense of self, and then you are doing what in our terms I would call transvocation, right? You are emanating yourself as that being, seeing yourself and all reality as the mandala of that being, and then invoking that being so that whatever reality it has outside of you is melded inseparably with your generation of the mandala and your sense of being that deity, and then changing yourself thereby when you chant the mantra and do the meditations, right? So the success in practice isn't seeing Vajrayogini like you saw a ghost. The success is the degree to which you are more Buddha-like. The only other question that came in over email that was actually marked for AMA Q&A. In your book, Consorting with Spirits, why does the guardian angel ritual come with such life-changing warnings like do this at the beginning of your magical practice or retirement? How is the guardian angel different from other spirits that you have a relationship with? So it's not so much that the spirit is fundamentally different, although it is very personalized, right? So we've got this personalized spirit that is supposed to represent your personal connection with the divine in the highest sense. So in a monotheistic sense, God, right? And if you're not a monotheist, it doesn't really matter. This angel is personal to you. It is your angel. It is your direct relationship with the divine. What you think that is, the facts behind what it is, I don't care. But it's the knowledge and conversation part, right? Like Catholics everywhere say, guardian angel, dear, let me, whatever the stupid prayer is. And they don't worry about like, upheaval in their lives because they've prayed to their guardian angel. No, it's the knowledge and conversation part. See, what you are doing when you're seeking the knowledge and conversation is you want an intimate connection. You are saying, I want to get to know you bodily. I want to be connected in a very, very intimate way that is absolutely unmistakable. So when, it provides this, it's like running, running 220 electricity to your house when everything in the house is built to take 110, right? You can do it, but shit's gonna blow out all over the place. And then you can adapt. This is why I say, do it at the beginning of your life when, you're not married, you're not far along in your career, you have the time to spend months where you're spending almost all day calling out to this being. And then, if your significant other leaves you, or you lose your job, or you get kicked out of your house, or, you get beat up in the street or something like that, it's not a devastating loss because you're doing it at a time where your life is already kind of like in flux. If you're doing it at the end of your life, hopefully your life is solid enough to handle upheaval, right? You're secure in your marriage. Your kids are grown. They're out of the house. You're looking at retirement. You're not very likely to be fired. Whereas in the middle there, things are a little touchy. Things are a little uncertain, even more uncertain in these uncertain times. And so it's really just, it's not that the angel is doing it. There are people out there who say, well, if it went wrong, it's because the angel knew you didn't need it. That is bullcrap. That's not at all how it works. It's not even how Abraham, who wrote the book, says it works. It is just a direct connection. You know, there's a point in Exodus where the Ark of the Covenant is being walked, you know, because the armies of God would march with the Ark of the Covenant up on a palanquin. And there's this moment where one of the guys carrying it trips and he's about to fall. And the Ark of the freaking Covenant is about to hit the ground, probably blow open. And if you've seen the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know that's not good. So you know, somebody comes along and he just grabs it to stop it from falling. And he dies. He dies because he touched it without, he's not of the right caste. He's not, you know, he's not of the right tribe. He's not the right caste. He's not wearing the funky prophylactic breastplate with stones and all the stuff that you're supposed to have when you touch the Holy of Holies. He dies. Now, the translations of it usually explain that, you know, God is so damn serious about who gets to touch this and doesn't get to touch this that God killed this fucker for having the temerity to touch the Ark of the Covenant because he didn't want it to fall. But I have trouble with that interpretation. I tend to think that he died for the same reason that if there's a live wire out in the street and there's a, like, you know, a kid running towards it, if you run and you grab the electrical wire to stop the kid from getting it, you're going to die. Because the electricity didn't kill you because it's mad at you or it thought you needed to move on. The electricity killed you because it's electricity. So you're taking a being that is very personal, very powerful, not oriented to your ordinary state of consciousness, and you're essentially forcing it and your ordinary state of consciousness to meld, not for the span of an evocation, which is short, but for the rest of your life. That's a big deal. It takes a long time. It's an uncomfortable thing. And so that's why all the dire warnings. So that is that. And it's 3:02, so we've been going for about 2 hours. But that was such a weird and heavy question to end on. Don't have any questions in the chat. So I'm going to take a couple more from Insta. Some of these I already answered because you showed up live, and thank you for it. Do spirits or does Hecate herself ever come to you to talk about another witch or a magic practitioner that needs your guidance with a message to them? So the answer to this is no. Actually, that's not true. It has happened, but I am not in that business. The person that it happened with, I knew would be open to it. And so I shared it with them. But in fact, I go the opposite route. So people join the Sorcery of Hecate course, which is a training in a very specific type of magic. And then they pop in and they're like, I had this vision and this dream and that. What does it mean? What does it mean? And I never say what it means because most of the time I don't know what it means. And I suspect probably 90% of the time that it doesn't really mean anything because of projection perception ratio. So what I tell them is there anything useful that you should do, like actionable steps? If not, is there anything meaningful that helps you frame your life, or problems or that's helpful in thinking about something? If so, if the actions make sense and they're not too risky, then take it and see what happens. And if it's meaningful and it makes your life deeper, better, happier, then take it and go and roll with it. But not everything means something. And if it doesn't mean something, it doesn't mean that it wasn't an authentic spiritual communication. It could just be like a thumbs up, like, hey, you're doing really great at this practice, keep going. That's not a moment to pause and say, what does Hecate mean by the thumbs up? The thumb, perhaps I should focus on my thumb instead of doing the practice. No, she's telling you, keep doing what you're doing, right? If anything at all. So I usually just say, look for these things, and if it's actionable and useful, then roll with it, and if not, then don't. And then when people contact other people out of the blue with like, so and so has a message, it's just, don't do it. Don't do it. It's not polite. It's not good protocol. It's not good for the community. It is, I'm not saying that you're a scammer if you do that, but it is what scammers do. Like when people create these fake Instagram profiles pretending to be me or Matt Arn or Judicate Yills, they reach out to people that follow them and say, oh, I saw your name and I had a notion and I thought you might want a reading from me. So don't do that. And I can tell you truly, like, if tonight I go to sleep and Hecate herself appears and says, I have a message for you to give to Laura or Karen. And it was like the most real dream I've ever had. And the message was like, something that would even fit my bill of like actionable and intelligible. I'd be like, nope, not contacting them. That's not my job. It's not, and they have no reason to believe me. And it's not like, I don't want people to start doing that. So it's just, not only do I not do it, I think it should not be done most of the time, unless it is a message for somebody that is very close to you, that you know personally, and that it's something that will be helpful and kind for that person. And with a lot of caveats, like, hey, I was meditating, I got this feeling, take it for what it's worth, but a little humility goes a long way in those situations. So but otherwise, yeah, I see a lot of this, and people in my classes, sometimes one student reaches out to another student, is like, I have a message from Hecate for you. And I really like, then it gets back around to me when it gets weird. And I'd be like, I really wish people wouldn't do that. So that's it. Thank you all for the Q&A. This has all been about spirits. The book is Consorting with Spirits, your guide to working with invisible allies, which they are. I'm going to go ahead and unmute all. If I can unmute all, it just says mute all. It doesn't actually say unmute all. How weird is that? If I hit mute all, will it unmute all? No. Anyway, you can unmute yourselves and say goodbye or whatever, but that's the Q&A. So thank you so much. This was a fruitful 2 hours. When I opened this up to everybody, I was sort of like, oh God, what questions will I get? And you know what? Across the board, really good, really solid. There are some questions I didn't answer because there were just too many. Or maybe I think, like I gave it the answer and in the answer of another question, but I got 0 bad questions. And I'm not one of those people that's like, there's no dumb questions. There totally are. But there were none, which you know, I guess as parting words, I would just say the community overall is good, and it's still good. And because we now, you know, it's so much easier to find the other weird people that are into this through the internet, that the internet colors the community. And so, especially once the algorithm started controlling what we see a lot more of the things that make us angry. And so, or we hear things that we think are dumb, and then we want to and the raging over like witch talk, and like, I don't have anything to say about it because I'm not over there, but I suspect that probably a lot of them are great. And that there's just a few voices that get amplified. And so whether it's the people you agree with or that you don't agree with, don't let the outliers represent the whole. Whether it's a group you agree with or disagree with, don't let the outliers speak for the whole. And definitely don't think, oh, well, the community is just terrible, because like I said, an open Q&A with more than a week to ask questions, and as far as I'm concerned, they were all good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This will be up on
Thank
YouTube
you.
as soon as I can get it up on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to end the recording, but I'll stay on for a minute.